The little brass tag pinned to Nora Pike's collar said 6 years. It did not say property. It did not have to. Every man in Red Lantern Crossing could read what the tag meant. 6 years of labor to settle her father's debt. 6 years of cooking, washing, hauling water, mending shirts, sleeping wherever the buyer allowed. 6 years in a territory where winter buried fences, men settled insults with rifles, and a woman with no family could disappear without leaving a ripple. Nora stood on the courthouse steps in a gray wool dress, 2 sizes too thin for the weather. Her hands were folded in front of her, so no one could see them shaking. 3 days earlier, she had buried her father behind the windbreak with a broken shovel and no preacher. He had borrowed against seed, against mules, against the roof over their heads, then lost the paper in card rooms where men called him friend until the money ran out. When the creditors opened his account, the number was $1,460. Nora had owned a cracked comb, a pair of boots with split soles, and her mother's tin locket. The law owned the rest. The auctioneer lifted her chin with the blunt end of his cane. "Nora Pike," he called. 19. Can read, write, cook, sew, keep a house, and do light field work. 6-year indenture to satisfy a lawful debt. Opening bid, $40. The crowd shifted. A freighter offered 60. A storekeeper said 80. A trapper with yellow teeth said 100 and licked his thumb before counting bills. Nora kept her eyes on the mud below the steps. She told herself that if she did not look at them, they could not choose her whole future from their faces. Then the bids climbed higher. 150, 200, 275. That was when fear changed shape. Cheap meant back-breaking work. Expensive meant a man wanted something specific. Back of the crowd, a voice cut through the wind. 720. The town went quiet. Nora looked up. The man who had spoken stood beside a black wagon with high wheels and iron rims. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, and still in the way mountains are still before an avalanche. A scar pulled white across his right cheek. His coat was old buffalo hide. His gloves were patched. His eyes were the color of wet slate and looked like they had already buried too much. Someone muttered his name. Silas Vale. Nora had heard it before. Everyone in that part of Dakota Territory had heard it. Silas Vale owned Cinder Ridge, a mountain ranch with cold springs, timber rights, and enough grazing land to make other men hateful. He had also lost his wife in winter, stopped coming to church, and sent 4 housekeepers back down the mountain in tears. The auctioneer blinked. $720 for the girl? For the contract, Silas said. And if your cane touches her again, I'll buy that too, and break it over your teeth. No one bid after that. The clerk read the terms. 6 years, room and board, lawful discipline, transfer rights, work as assigned. Nora heard the words as if they were coming from the bottom of a well. When the papers were signed, Silas climbed the courthouse steps. Up close he smelled of horse sweat, pine smoke, and snow. "Do you have a coat?" he asked. Nora shook her head. He took off the buffalo hide coat and put it around her shoulders. It was heavy enough to make her knees bend. "Then wear mine. We leave now." "Why did you pay so much?" she asked before she could stop herself. Silas looked toward the men still watching from the street. "Because cheap things get treated cheap," he said, "and I am tired of watching this territory mistake price for worth." That was the first time Nora felt the brass tag against her throat and hated it less than the eyes that had put it there. Cinder Ridge was a 2-hour ride from the nearest pass, and a lifetime from Red Lantern Crossing. The trail climbed through black spruce, frozen creek beds, and cliffs sharp enough to split the wind. Nora sat beside Silas on the wagon bench, wrapped in his coat, listening to the wheels bite through old snow. He did not fill the silence. Neither did she. At sundown, the trees opened onto a valley ringed by dark hills. A stone house stood at the center, 2 stories high, with a roof patched in 3 different colors. Beyond it were barns, corrals, a saw shed, a smokehouse, and fences that leaned like tired men. It was larger than any place Nora had ever seen. It was also failing. Half the north fence had been mended with rope. 1 barn door hung crooked. A pile of split rails sat buried under snow, as if someone had meant to repair something and then lost the will. The front door burst open before the wagon stopped. A girl of 13 ran out first, thin and sharp-eyed, with dark braids and a face set in war. A smaller boy followed, maybe 10, gripping a fireplace poker like a weapon. "You brought another one," the girl said. Silas stepped down. "Annie, put that look away." "No." The boy pointed the poker at Nora. "Need her." "Tom, send her back. I paid for 6 years. "Then you got cheated," Annie said. Her voice cracked on the last word, which made it crueler, not weaker. "She'll leave before spring. They all do." Nora climbed down from the wagon by herself. The brass tag tapped against her collarbone beneath the coat. "I can't leave," she said. Annie's eyes moved to the tag. Something like shame flickered there, and then anger covered it. "Everybody can leave," she said. "They just find a way." Inside, the house smelled of ash, old bread, wet wool, and grief. It was not merely messy. It was defeated. Dishes crusted in the sink. Laundry lay in heaps. Cold rooms went unused. A confusion of half-empty sacks, mouse-bitten paper, and unlabeled jars. A parlor that must have once been beautiful had been shut up so long the air tasted stale. Silas carried Nora's small bundle upstairs and stopped at a narrow door. "This is yours." The room held a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked toward the barns. "Children are across the hall," he said. "I'm at the far end. Kitchen starts before dawn. Ranch hands eat at 5. Annie and Tom will fight you, because fighting is easier than missing their mother. Don't take it personal." Nora turned. "And you?" Silas's jaw tightened. Then he left her there with the borrowed coat, the brass tag, and a house that felt like it had been waiting for someone to give up in it. Nora did not give up. She started with the kitchen because hunger was honest. A dirty floor could lie about being hopeless. A burned pot could not. She boiled water, scraped grease, carried ashes, found flour, counted eggs, trimmed mold from cheese, and scrubbed until her knuckles split. At midnight, the stove shone black and clean for the first time in months. From upstairs came whispers, then a crash. Nora found Annie and Tom in their mother's old room, throwing books from a shelf. Not reading them, punishing them. "Stop," Nora said. "This isn't your room," Annie snapped. "No, but it is still a room." Tom threw another book. The The spine cracked. Nora crossed the floor, picked it up, and set it on the table. Annie's eyes were red. You think cleaning will make us like you? No? Good. I think breakfast will taste better if the kitchen doesn't stink. Tom lowered the poker. You're not scared of us? I was sold in public today, Nora said. You two will have to work harder than this. For a moment, neither child spoke. Then Annie laughed once. It was not friendly, but it was real. The next morning, Nora made biscuits, salt pork, beans, coffee, and corn cakes from meal she found under a torn sack. The ranch hands came in suspicious and left silent, which Nora understood as praise. Silas ate standing until she told him to sit. He looked surprised enough to obey. Annie refused her plate until Tom took one bite and forgot he was angry. For 10 days the children tested her. They hid her boots in the chicken shed. She found them and wore them with feathers stuck to the laces. They spilled wash water. She hauled more. They told a ranch hand she had stolen sugar, unlocked the pantry, counted every pound in front of him, and then made Annie write the new inventory herself. On the 11th day, Tom fell from the hayloft and split his chin open. He tried not to cry, because Silas Vale's son did not cry. Nora held a cloth to the wound and said, If you bleed on my clean floor, I will charge you rent. Tom laughed through the tears. That was the first crack. The second came from Annie. Nora found her late one night at the kitchen table, staring at a small recipe book with a blue cloth cover. The handwriting inside was careful, slanted, and elegant. My mother made apple cake on my birthday, Annie said without looking up. She's made it since. Nora read the recipe. We don't have apples. I know. We have dried pears. Annie looked at her then. 2 days later, on a bitter, bright morning, they made pear cake. It sank in the middle and burned at one edge. Tom declared it the best thing anyone had ever baked. Annie told him he was an idiot and ate 2 slices. Silas watched from the doorway with something breaking and healing in his face. Nora learned the house. Then she learned the ranch. She learned that Cinder Ridge should have been rich. It had water in a dry territory, timber worth money, grass sheltered from the worst wind, and a road to the railhead if the mountain pass stayed open. She also learned that money disappeared there, not all at once, never enough for a loud alarm. 10 steers missing after a drive, a timber wagon overturned on a good road, 2 crates of nails paid for but never delivered, 11 sacks of oats short in a shipment no one remembered unloading, a horse lamed by a cut cinch, a fence gate left open, a bridge plank removed the night before Silas was due home with supplies. One afternoon, while cleaning the smokehouse, Nora found a tin dispatch box hidden behind a loose stone. Inside were old brand books, freight receipts, and a blue-covered account ledger with the same elegant handwriting as Annie's recipe book. Lydia Vale had kept the ranch's numbers before she died. Smokehouse floor with dust on her skirt, and followed 3 years of losses with a finger. The pattern rose clear as a fence line under snow. When Silas was home, losses were small. When Silas rode to town, to timber camp, to inspect the west herd, the ranch bled. Always just enough to weaken him, never enough to start a war. Someone knew his schedule. Someone knew his grief. Someone had been eating Cinder Ridge from the inside. She found Silas in the far barn, working a burr from a mare's mane with hands gentle enough to surprise her. You have a thief, Nora said. Silas did not turn. Everyone has thieves. Not like this. She gave him Lydia's ledger. he read like a man expecting an inconvenience. Then his face changed. Page by page, anger replaced exhaustion. Where did you find this? Smokehouse wall. Lydia hid it. She was tracking the losses before she died. Silas closed the book slowly. Amos Varden. Nora knew the name. Varden owned the land east of Cinder Ridge, a polished man with 3 ranches, a private sheriff, and more bank credit than conscience. He had offered to buy Silas out twice after Lydia's death. The second offer came with a condolence ham. "Can you prove it?" Nora asked. "No." "Then we start." Silas looked at her. "We?" "You paid $720, she said. "You may as well get proper accounting." It was the first time he smiled in her presence. Not much, just enough to show the man under the grief was not dead. Nora became the keeper of Cinder Ridge's books. The ranch hands hated it. Caro, the foreman, spat tobacco into the dirt and asked if a bought girl was going to count his saddle straps next. Nora asked him how many straps he had. He did not know. She did. The answer was 17, because she had already counted them. After that, the men stopped laughing where she could hear. Under Nora's system, every shipment was opened twice. Every animal mark was recorded. Every tool had a nail on a wall and a chalk number beneath it. If a sack moved, she wrote it down. If a man borrowed a saw, he signed for it. If a wagon left, she checked its axle before and after. The losses slowed. Then Varden changed tactics. A hayshed burned on a windless night. Silas found lamp oil soaked into the back wall. Annie and Tom stood barefoot in the snow, watching the flames eat half the winter feed. Tom's face was white. Annie gripped Nora's hand so hard it hurt. "Can we replace it?" Annie whispered. Nora looked at the burning shed, then at Silas, who stood as still as a headstone. "Not fast enough," she said. "So we don't replace it. We outlast the loss." How? Nora did not know yet, but she had learned something from ledgers. A bad number was not the end. It was a question demanding an answer. They sold no cattle. Instead, Nora cut rations, traded timber planks for hay, persuaded 2 smaller ranches to share winter feed in exchange for spring breeding rights, and made Caro ride 40 miles to collect a freight refund for goods never delivered. Caro complained the whole way. He came back with the money. After that, he called her Miss Pike. The house changed around her. The floors stayed clean. The pantry made sense. The ranch hands ate better and stole less, because there was less confusion to hide in. Annie learned columns and sums from Lydia's old ledgers. Tom learned to mend harness. Silas began coming inside before the lamps burned low. One night, when snow pressed against the windows and the children slept, Silas found Nora in the kitchen, balancing accounts by candlelight. "You should sleep," he said. "So should you." "I don't sleep well in winter." "Because of Lydia?" He sat across from her, the candle cutting hard shadows into his scar. "She died trying to reach town for a doctor," he said. "Tom had fever. I was at the North Camp. The bridge over Crow Run was out. She took the lower road, and her horse slipped on ice. They found her in the morning." Nora's pen stopped. "Varden's men had been seen near that bridge," Silas said. "I thought it was grief making patterns where none existed. Now I don't know." Nora thought of the removed planks, the damaged cinches, the losses that arrived whenever Silas looked away. "Then we prove it," she said. His eyes lifted. "You make it sound simple." No, I make it sound necessary. In that moment, something passed between them. Not comfort, not romance. Something more dangerous. Recognition. Both of them had been priced by the territory. Silas as a widower too broken to hold land. Nora as labor with a tag on her collar. Both had learned the same insult in different forms. You are worth less than what can be taken from you. Cinder Ridge became their answer. The proof came by accident. A blizzard rose early in March, fast and violent. Silas rode out with 10 men to move cattle from the upper basin before snow trapped them there. He left Caro, Nora, the children, and 6 hands at the ranch. By nightfall, the storm had sealed the valley. By midnight, Tom was coughing. By dawn, Annie was burning with fever too. Nora knew the sound of lung sickness. Wet breath, shallow chest, the frightening pauses between. The medicine cabinet was empty because the last bottle had gone to Tom's hayloft, wound when it turned foul. Caro said no horse could reach Red Lantern Crossing in that weather. Nora wrapped Silas's old coat around herself. Then give me the horse that knows the road. Caro stared at her. You'll die. Maybe. Silas will kill me. Only if I come back dead. Caro tied her to the saddle with a rope because falling off in whiteout meant vanishing. He gave her a scarf, a flask, and the fastest mare on the ranch, a red horse named Mercy. Follow the creek until the second bend, he said. Then trust the mare. If you get sleepy, bite your tongue. Nora rode into the storm. The world disappeared. No road, no sky, no valley, only white violence and the burn of air too cold to breathe. Snow packed into her lashes. Her hands went numb inside the gloves. Twice Mercy stumbled through drifts. Once she stopped dead, refusing to move, and Nora realized a heartbeat later that the road had vanished at the edge of a washed-out cut. Good girl, Nora whispered, lips too frozen to shape the words. She lost time. She lost feeling. She lost every thought except 2 children breathing wrong in an upstairs room. When the lights of Red Lantern Crossing finally appeared, Nora thought she had dreamed them. Then hands were pulling her off the horse, shouting her name, dragging her into the saloon, where warmth hurt worse than cold. The doctor called her a fool. She told him he could call her anything he liked after he got his bag. At first he refused to ride back before morning. The storm was too hard, the road too dangerous. Nora stood on feet she could not feel, and said, Then write their names on the death certificate now, so you can save yourself the trouble. The saloon went silent. The doctor cursed, buttoned his coat, and followed her. They reached Cinder Ridge after sunrise. Both children were worse. Annie did not wake when Nora called her. Tom's lips had gone blue. For 12 hours, Nora worked beside the doctor. Medicine every 4 hours. Cool cloths. Broth by the spoon. Steam over the basin. Prayers she did not believe in. Commands she did. Fight, she told Tom when his eyes rolled back. Do you hear me? You are not allowed to leave your sister. Fight, she told Annie. You are not done making everyone miserable. Near midnight, Tom's fever broke. At dawn, Annie opened her eyes and whispered, You came back. Nora leaned over the bed, shaking from exhaustion and cold. I said I would. Annie's fingers closed weakly around hers. Others said that. I'm not others. That was when Silas came home. He entered the room covered in snow, saw both children alive, saw Nora sitting between their beds with frost burns on her face, and lost every careful piece of himself. He fell to his knees beside Tom's bed, then Annie's. Then he crossed to Nora and held her so tightly she could feel him shaking. "You rode through that," he said. "They needed a doctor. You could have died. So could they." His forehead rested against hers for one unguarded second. Nora did not move. Neither did he. Then Caro appeared in the doorway, pale as tallow. "Riders coming from the east." Silas stood. Nora stood too, though the room tilted. "Varden?" she asked. 20 men at least. Varden had waited for the storm, waited for Silas to split his crew, waited for the children to be sick and the ranch to be frightened. He rode in under a clearing sky with polished boots, a gray horse, and a smile like a knife wrapped in silk. Silas met him in the yard with a rifle lowered but ready. Nora came out behind him carrying Lydia's ledger, the freight receipts, the brand book, and 3 telegraph copies she had sent weeks earlier to ranchers who had suffered the same kind of losses. Varden laughed when he saw her. "Still letting the contract girl run your affairs, Silas?" Nora stepped forward. "Not run, cord." Varden's eyes cooled. "Careful. I have been careful for months." She opened the ledger. 10 steers missing after your buyer arrived on November 4th. 11 sacks of oats short after your freight man signed for 20 and delivered 9. Bridge planks removed from Crow Run the night Lydia Vale died. A burnt hay shed with lamp oil from the same supplier your East Camp uses. 3 neighboring ranches missing cattle with rebrands matching your South herd. I sent copies to Red Lantern, Fort Haskell, and the Territorial Marshal. For the first time, Varden stopped smiling. "You are bluffing." "No," Nora said. "I am accounting." Behind Varden, his men shifted. They did not like warrants. Silas stepped beside her. "You wanted me grieving," he said. "You wanted me tired. You wanted me alone." Varden's mouth twisted. "You are alone. That girl is bought labor in a borrowed coat." Annie's voice came from the porch. "She is family." Tom stood beside her, wrapped in a blanket, pale but upright. Caro and the ranch hands formed behind them. Then, from the south road, more riders appeared. Not Silas's men, other ranchers, men and women who had read Nora's copies, recognized their own losses, and decided that Varden's empire looked less impressive when counted properly. 38 riders came into the yard. Varden looked at them, then at Nora. Hatred stripped the polish from his face. "You think paper can be power?" Nora lifted the ledger. "No. People who keep paper can." The marshal arrived 2 days later. He had not come because Silas Vale was important. He came because 38 ranches had signed complaints, because 3 newspapers had received copies of the pattern, and because Nora's numbers made Varden's private sheriff look bought. Varden tried charm first, then outrage, then a hand on his pistol. The marshal put him in iron before he cleared leather. The trial lasted 7 weeks. Varden's lawyers called Nora uneducated, desperate, improper, and unreliable. They asked whether a girl sold on courthouse steps could understand contracts. They asked whether she had invented theft to improve her position in Silas Vale's house. They asked whether she knew the difference between evidence and resentment. Nora answered with dates. She answered with weights, brands, signatures, receipts, and names. She did not defend her dignity. She made them defend their arithmetic. When the jury returned, The foreman read guilty 4 times. Fraud, theft, conspiracy, criminal negligence in the death of Lydia Vale. Varden stared at Nora as the marshal led him away. "This is not over," he said. Nora touched the place where the brass tag had once hung. "For you," she said, "it is." Cinder Ridge did not become easy after that. Nothing in that country became easy. The burned hay shed had to be rebuilt. The north fence still sagged. Money came in slowly and left quickly. Spring calving stole sleep. Summer fires threatened timber. Winter returned as if it had never been beaten. But the ranch was no longer dying. Under Nora's books, Cinder Ridge turned profit by the second autumn. Timber contracts formed a freight pool with the other ranches and made every man who mocked her sign his own receipts until he learned to spell properly or stopped borrowing tools. Annie became better at numbers than any clerk in Red Lantern Crossing. Tom grew tall, kind, and dangerous with a rope. Caro retired from complaining, which everyone agreed was a greater miracle than Varden's conviction. As for Silas, he did what he should have done the day Nora arrived. He burned the indenture contract in the kitchen stove. Nora watched the paper blacken. "You paid $720 for that," she said. "I paid $720 to get you off those steps," he said. "I have spent every day since learning I could never buy what you are." He placed a small cloth pouch on the table. Inside were wages, 6 months of them counted fairly. Nora looked at the money, then at him. "What if I leave?" His face did not flinch, though the question hurt him. "Then I will hitch the wagon and drive you wherever you choose." "And if I stay?" His voice lowered. "Then I will spend the rest of my life remembering you chose it." She stayed. Not that night because he asked. Not because the children needed her. Not because the ranch had become her work. Because choice felt different in the hand than survival. It had weight. It had warmth. It did not hang from a brass tag. It did not need a clerk's stamp. The wedding came in spring when the valley was full of meltwater and wildflowers thin as candle flames. People arrived from every ranch in the new alliance. The doctor came, still calling Nora a fool. The marshal came and brought a newspaper clipping with Varden's sentence printed in bold type. Annie braided blue thread into Nora's hair. Tom stood beside Silas and tried very hard not to cry. Nora wore a plain dress and her mother's tin locket. No brass tag. When the preacher asked if she took Silas Vale freely, Nora answered loud enough for the hills to hear. Freely. Years later, travelers would stop at Cinder Ridge to hear the story of the girl bought for 6 years who broke the richest man in the valley with a ledger. Nora always corrected them. The ledger did not break him, she would say. The truth did. The ledger only kept him from wriggling away from it. By then, Cinder Ridge employed 30 hands. The house was warm. The barns stood straight. The children were grown. Women from distant claims came to ask how Nora had learned to run accounts, bargain with freighters, and make powerful men answer questions. She told them the same thing every time. Start by counting what they hope you will ignore. That was her gift to the territory. Not the ranch, not the marriage, not even the victory over Varden. It was proof. Proof that a price was not the same as worth. Proof that desperation was not the same as weakness. Proof that a woman could be bought by a broken system and still become the hand that broke it back. On quiet mornings, Nora sometimes touched her throat where the brass tag had rested. She would remember the courthouse steps, the cold, the men bidding, the terrible certainty that her life was ending. Then she would look across the valley she had helped save. The worst day of her life had not been an ending. It had been a door, and Nora Pike Vale had walked through it, carrying nothing but a cracked comb, a tin locket, and a rage so disciplined it learned arithmetic. The territory priced her once. After that, she kept the books.